Welcome to Tangled Logic, the place where we unravel the chilling threads of the strange, the dark, and the mysterious. If you're fascinated by unsettling stories, eerie events, and unexplained phenomena that blur the line between reality and the unknown, you've found your home. Each tale is crafted to grip your mind, twist your perception, and leave you thinking long after the story ends. If that sounds like your kind of thrill, don't just watch in the shadows. Hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and ring the bell so you never miss a twist in the tale. In the quiet of Anchorage, Alaska, on the morning of February 2, 2012, a young barista pulled his car into a large, snowy parking lot. He worked at a popular teal-colored coffee shop called the Common Grounds. Passing dozens of parked cars, he arrived at the white employee entrance. His key turned in the lock, but the door was already open. Samantha Koenig, 18, had worked the previous night. Though new, she was responsible and had never failed to lock up before. Shrugging it off as a simple mistake, he stepped inside. The immediate disarray was striking. Napkins on the ground, towels out, cups scattered. It looked as if Samantha had simply vanished mid-shift, leaving everything in chaos. As he walked to the cash register, scenarios raced through his mind. Then, like the door, the register was unlocked. The money tray was empty. A robbery. He immediately called his boss. The night before, Samantha's boyfriend, Dwayne, was meant to pick her up after her shift. He arrived at the kiosk around 8:30 p.m., half an hour late due to his job. The parking lot was empty. Samantha was nowhere in sight, and the coffee shop was dark, appearing closed. Dwayne, stepping out into the freezing cold, pressed his face to the window, peering inside but saw no one. His mind drifted to an ugly text message fight they'd had earlier. She'd accused him of cheating, and he'd been nonchalant. Perhaps, he thought, Samantha had simply gotten a ride home from her father or a friend to avoid him because of their argument. He returned to his truck, texting Samantha to ask if she was okay and if she'd made it home. After several minutes of silence, despite their fight, his concern for her welfare compelled him to drive to her house. A few minutes later, he arrived at Samantha's home. Her single father, James, answered the door. Dwayne explained he hadn't seen Samantha after her shift and wanted to ensure she was there. James, however, said she wasn't, and he hadn't spoken to her. The two men sat in James's kitchen, frantically calling and texting Samantha. After a few minutes, Dwayne's phone lit up with a text from Samantha. The message was clearly angry, stating she needed time to think and would be with friends for a couple of days. It asked Dwayne to inform her father. Dwayne showed James the message. James found it highly uncharacteristic of Samantha. He had raised her since she was 2, and they were incredibly close, sharing everything. It made no sense for her to not contact him directly, especially considering his obvious worry and her unresponsiveness to his calls and texts. The two men stayed up late, continuing to call and text, hoping for more information, but Samantha never replied. The following morning, with still no word from her, James went to the Anchorage Police Department and filed a missing person report for his only daughter. An officer, receiving the report, contacted the owner of the Common Grounds coffee shop, who revealed a robbery had occurred and Samantha was unreachable. The owner promised to send the security footage as soon as she retrieved it. While waiting for the video, officers began calling Samantha's friends and family, but no one had heard from her or had any information about her whereabouts. Other officers visited the kiosk, finding no signs of struggle inside or out. The panic button under the counter hadn't been pressed. Despite Samantha's father's unease about her final text, police initially theorized Samantha had robbed the kiosk and left voluntarily. What baffled them was how she'd left. She didn't have a car, and the weather was too miserable and cold for her to walk away. Anchorage wasn't a walkable city. If she was truly with friends, why did none of them know where she was? This question was answered later that day when the coffee shop owner provided the security footage. The silent video begins around 8 p.m. on February 1, 2012. It shows Samantha working alone, appearing cheerful and busy. A person, out of camera range, approaches the window and orders a drink. Samantha turns, acknowledges the order, and begins making it. Upon finishing, she turns to hand over the drink, immediately stepping back with her arms raised. Seconds later, she turns off the kiosk lights and kneels with her back to the window. She remains still for about a minute before slowly standing, walking to the cash register, opening it, and scooping out money. She returns to the window, seemingly handing the money to a shadowy figure. Samantha then turns and kneels again. 2 more minutes pass before the person outside leans their upper body into the coffee shop, reaching down to seemingly tie Samantha's hands. Due to the darkness, the footage is extremely grainy, making it impossible to identify the figure, though it's clearly a male in a large sweatshirt and a hat pulled low. After tying Samantha's hands, the mystery man leaps through the window, shutting it behind him. He stands Samantha up, places a gun in her back, and marches her out the employee door, across the parking lot, and into a white pickup truck, where they drive off. Over the next couple of days, the police and the FBI, now involved in the investigation, faced dead end after dead end. There was no evidence beyond the grainy surveillance footage, making it impossible to identify Samantha's abductor. Meanwhile, Samantha's father, James, rallied almost all 300,000 residents of Anchorage to search for his daughter. His profound efforts attracted major national news outlets, and suddenly his daughter's story gripped headlines across the country. This national attention led to strangers donating thousands of dollars to fund a reward for any information about Samantha's whereabouts. But despite the reward, growing daily and intense national media interest, no one came forward with useful information that led to any developments. Samantha never contacted Dwayne or her father. Then, on February 24th, 3 weeks after Samantha vanished without a trace, Dwayne received a text message from her phone. It directed him to a specific sign in a nearby public park. Dwayne and James shared the text with the police, then raced to the park, arriving about 15 minutes before the authorities. They walked through the gates and down the main trail, stopping in front of a bulletin board. Tacked to the bulletin board was a Ziploc bag containing a typed ransom note. On the note, a black and white photocopy of Samantha showed her looking dazed, with a blank expression, gazing slightly off camera. A man's hand held a copy of the Anchorage Daily News newspaper, dated February 13, 2012, next to her. This was a proof-live photo, indicating Samantha was alive as of the 13th. For everyone involved, including Samantha's father, this was a small, albeit grim, relief at least last week she was alive. The ransom note demanded James immediately deposit $30,000 into his daughter's account, after which she would be released 6 months later. As advised by the FBI, James deposited a portion of the ransom money into his daughter's account. The FBI then waited and watched, knowing they could track anyone attempting to withdraw money from it. A few days later, 3 separate withdrawals were made within Anchorage. Each time the FBI was notified, they rushed to the scene, but the person who made the withdrawal was long gone. Security footage from these 3 ATMs showed a man wearing a ski mask and large sunglasses, making identification impossible. After these withdrawals, the account went silent for over a week, with no word from Samantha. Then, on March 7th, more withdrawals were made, this time in Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Authorities again rushed to these ATMs, only to find the masked man with sunglasses had just left. However, there was a breakthrough this time. In one of the surveillance videos from a Texas ATM, they spotted the car the man entered before leaving, a small white Ford Focus. He was seen driving east on a Texas highway. Texas authorities were alerted to look for this specific car in that area. Sure enough, on March 13th, a Texas patrolman spotted the car in a hotel parking lot. He waited nearby until a man in his 30s emerged from a hotel room, walked to the car, and got inside. The patrolman followed, looking for any reason to pull him over. His radar gun showed the man driving 2 miles per hour above the speed limit, so he initiated a stop. The patrolman approached the driver's side window, which was already down. The man was remarkably calm. When asked for his license, he presented an Alaskan one. His name was Israel Keys, 34, and he lived in Anchorage. The patrolman knew this was their man. He called for backup, and soon Keys' car was being searched. In the trunk, they found a ski mask and other clothing matching the description of the guy who was making withdrawals from these different ATMs. They also found a gun, as well as Samantha's cell phone and debit card. After his arrest and being taken into custody, Keys initially denied any involvement in Samantha's disappearance. However, when presented with overwhelming evidence, he caved. He agreed to tell the full story of what happened to Samantha, but only if they provided him with an Americano coffee, a peanut butter Snickers, and a cigar. Once he had his requested items, he began to speak. What he revealed was so disturbing and graphic that the FBI has still not released the full transcript of his confession. Here is the version of events based on what has been made public. On February 1st, 2012, Keys decided to rob the Common Grounds coffee kiosk. He walked up to the window, expecting to find a teenager working inside, and he was right, it was Samantha. He asked her for an Americano. As she turned to make his drink, his plan abruptly changed. He would not only steal money, but also steal Samantha. When she turned back with his drink and handed it to him, he discreetly pulled out his gun, aimed it at her, and declared it a robbery. Samantha immediately backed up, put her hands up, and then turned around. He tied her hands, jumped through the window, and after shutting it, jammed napkins into her mouth to silence her. He then marched her out the employee door into his car, and they drove off. Once in the vehicle, he removed the napkins from her mouth, warning her that any attempt to escape or flag someone down would result in her death. Samantha, obviously terrified, remained obedient and tried to stay composed. At some point, Keys took her phone and sent the text message to her boyfriend, Dwayne, stating she would be with friends for a couple of days and that he should inform her father. Keys then told Samantha he would be holding her hostage and trying to extract some ransom money. Samantha informed Keys that her family was very poor and he wouldn't get much money from them. Keys dismissed her concerns, saying, "Don't worry about it. I know they'll raise money and they'll come up with it somehow." They then drove around Anchorage for several hours, periodically stopping for Samantha to relieve herself or for Keys to smoke a cigar. Around midnight, Keys drove back to his house. He pulled into the driveway, instructed Samantha to get into the back seat and lie down, then covered her with tarps. He warned her again that any escape attempt would result in her death. Keys then entered his house, where his 10-year-old daughter and girlfriend were asleep. In just a few hours, Keys and his daughter were scheduled to leave for New Orleans for a 2-week luxury cruise. He left his house and returned to his car, blindfolding Samantha. He then led her down the driveway to his shed. Inside, he sat her down on an upturned bucket at the back of the shed. He placed a rope around her neck, anchoring each end to the wall, effectively pinning her. Keys then turned his radio volume all the way up to mask any noise she might make. Even though he repeatedly reminded her that any sound would result in her death, she was largely obedient. He offered her a couple of cigarettes, telling her to relax, that everything would be fine. He would get the ransom money from their family, and then he would let her go. He turned on some space heaters to keep the space warm, then left, locking the door behind him. He walked back into his house, double-checking that his daughter and girlfriend were still asleep. They were. Afterward, he began drinking some wine and relaxing. After a little while, he got a cup of water and returned to the shed. He went inside and gave the water to Samantha. He said Samantha was very composed, though obviously frightened. She asked him if he had spoken to her father and if the ransom situation was figured out. Keys told her, "Yes, I talked to your father. Everything's working out fine. He's going to raise the money. We're going to get you out of here. Everything's going exactly to plan." After that, he walked up to Samantha and unscrewed the 2 anchors that were holding that rope up against her throat. He then cut the zip ties on her wrists, allowing her to relax, sit forward, and just be at ease for a second. It was very obvious that Samantha was relieved, believing her nightmare was about to end. But seconds later, Keyes grabbed her aggressively and tied her up all over again, this time much more thoroughly and tightly. It had been a cruel trick. Cutting her handcuffs and untying her necktie was merely to see what she would do if she thought she was being let go, when in reality, he was never going to release her. There was no ransom. He had not spoken to her father. It was all a monstrous lie. Keyes told investigators that as he tied her up for that second time, he looked at her face and she had a look of total resignation. He said she knew what was about to happen to her. After tying her up, Keyes left the shed and locked it. He went inside to check one more time to ensure his 10-year-old daughter and girlfriend were still asleep. When they were, he returned to the shed. He opened it, stepped inside, and this time the air was thick with the smell of urine and sweat. He looked down at Samantha. She was terrified. He walked up to her and began to assault her. After he was done, he stood over her, putting his clothes back on. Samantha, with remarkable stoicism, looked up at him and asked, "Are you going to kill me?" He replied, "Yes, I am." As he put on his leather gloves, she tried to talk him out of it, but he said there was no other way. Keyes would later tell investigators that he was very impressed with Samantha's bravery. Shortly before 4 a.m., Keyes drove a knife into Samantha's back before choking her until she stopped moving. He told investigators that she never made a sound. After she was dead, Keyes left the shed and locked it behind him. He went into his house, took a shower, and then woke up his daughter, telling her to start getting ready because they were leaving soon for the airport. While his daughter was getting ready, Keyes went back out to the shed. He went inside, rolled Samantha's body up in a tarp, and pushed her towards the back. He unplugged the space heaters, turned off the lights, turned off the music, and then double-locked the shed before returning inside the house to make his daughter breakfast. At 5 a.m., a cab arrived at the house. Keyes and his daughter hopped inside, made their way to the airport, and then flew to New Orleans, where they embarked on their 2-week-long vacation. After they returned, Keyes went back into his shed. He unrolled Samantha from her tarp, and by his account, she still looked fairly lively. So, he dressed her in some new clothes, applied lots of makeup to her face, braided her hair, and then stitched her eyelids open to give the impression she was alive and alert. He then held up a copy of the Anchorage Daily News next to her and took several photos, creating that proof-life image for the ransom note. After he took these pictures, he chopped her body into pieces and disposed of her in a nearby frozen lake. It would turn out that Samantha was not Israel Keyes' first victim. He was, in fact, a serial killer who specifically preyed on completely random people because he enjoyed watching them die. Over the years, he had hidden what he called kill kits all over the United States. These were caches filled with weapons and other tools designed to capture and kill people. This way, no matter where he was in the country, when he felt an urge to kill someone, he would simply go to his nearest kill kit, dig it up, and then target a random stranger. He didn't care if you were young, old, big, small, male, female, alone, or in a group. Everyone was a target of opportunity. Keyes told investigators that as soon as he saw Samantha inside that coffee kiosk, he instantly knew he was going to kill her. Everything about the ransom, the robbery, all of it was just a lie to keep her in line, to give her some hope that she might get out of this alive. In reality, the second she walked outside of the doors of that kiosk, she was dead. Keyes admitted to killing Samantha, as well as an older couple in Vermont. But he would take his own life in a jail cell in December 2012 before naming any of his other victims. To this day, we have no idea how many people he killed. The best guess, based on a drawing he made in his jail cell, is 11. But that is just a guess. And that's our story for today. The chilling depths of human darkness can be a tangled logic, indeed. If you found yourself caught in the narrative, consider staying with Tangled Logic. We promise to keep bringing you stories that push the boundaries of the strange, dark, and mysterious. Until next time, stay safe out there.